Welcome to Genesis chapter 46 and the happy reunion of Joseph's family as we read the Bible together. So the entire tribe, and we'll find out shortly just how many people we're talking about, they saddle the donkeys, load the camels, fill the wagons, and hit the dusty trail. But first they make an important stop in Beersheba. Not only is this a significant spot marking the well dug by Abraham and reworked by Isaac, but it's also where both Isaac and Abraham had made covenants with Abimelech, who had been the ruler of that area. It's where the tribe had settled during Isaac's time, and it's from Beersheba that Jacob fled the wrath of Esau. It also marks what is in effect the southern boundary of the habitable area of the promised land. South of that, there's a lot of desert. And so, heading south from their settlement in Hebron, Jacob and his family arrive at Beersheba, which had become not only this significant ancestral settlement, but also a place of worship to God. And upon arrival, Jacob indeed offers sacrifices to the God of his father, Isaac. Perhaps these sacrifices were to not only offer the worship that is due to God and in memory of God's past deeds in that place, but remember, Jacob is on the verge of actually leaving the boundaries of the promised land, together with the whole family, kit and caboodle, as he's seeking the permission of God to leave Canaan. Will this be a violation of the covenant? Remember, he had turned down, by somewhat surreptitious means, Esau's offer to join him in Esau's homeland, since that was outside of the promised land. But now he's faced with leaving again. Is this a violation of the covenant? Well, he'd better find out. Now, you might remember in the old days, at the beginning of his adventure, God had spoken to Jacob in a dream or a vision not far from Beersheba. Remember the vision of the angels ascending and descending the ladder to heaven. Well, now God speaks to him again. We read, "And God spoke to Israel in a vision at night and said, 'Jacob, Jacob.' 'Here I am,' he replied. 'I am God, the God of your father,' he said. 'Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. I will go down to Egypt with you, and I will surely bring you back again, and Joseph's own hand will close your eyes.'" So, permission is granted, the covenant will continue, and the promise includes the continued presence of God as well as a guarantee of return. The language here is important. I will go down with you. They enter Egypt under their own steam, as it were, and God will accompany them. But then the change in language, I will surely bring you back again. Their return will be directly facilitated by God, as indeed it will be, as the book of Exodus will reveal. But we're not there yet. Now, the final statement in God's promise is that Joseph's own hand will close your eyes. That means that Jacob will die in Egypt, but he will do so with his favorite son at his side. In fact, Joseph's face will be the last thing that Jacob will see. The text then tells us that they left for Egypt with everyone and everything they owned, what I referred to earlier as the whole kit and caboodle, despite Pharaoh telling them, "Never mind about your belongings, for the best of Egypt will be yours." Well, they don't quite trust Pharaoh. And while this particular Pharaoh keeps his word, there will come a day when Pharaonic generosity will end completely. But again, that's in Exodus. We're not there yet. So now the text provides us a summary of just who and how many are en route to Egypt, and the details are all there. And the total family now numbers 70. It's quite a significant brood, and significant in that 70 was regarded as a perfect number. Now, curiously, to arrive at this number, the census points out that poor, unfortunate Dinah is excluded from the count without explanation. Dinah can never catch a break. My sister's name is Dinah, and I'll have to be extra nice to her in light of the raw deal that she gets in Genesis. I love you, sis. The assorted servants are neither counted nor named, but there would have been a goodly number of them also. Now, they're not actually going to where the brothers had gone before to buy grain and visit with Joseph in his home. Instead, an area has been designated in the land of Goshen, where they are to settle. Now, while not located in the epicenter of Egyptian life, it was still nevertheless on the eastern banks of the Nile Delta, and as a result, closer to the border of the Promised Land, where they would have come down along the coast and into Egypt, with the Nile Delta coming up in branches and tributaries like that. And Goshen was in this area, whereas the capital city is down here. And it's an area suitable for shepherding and livestock, which was at that time the Israelite stock in trade. Now, Jacob sends Judah to Joseph to ask for directions to where they're supposed to go, which is a good idea. In fact, it's an idea that Moses would have done well to remember. But again, that's in Exodus. No sooner do they arrive than Joseph pulls up in his chariot and embraces his father in tears, weeping, we are told, for a long time. Joseph's tear ducts are very close to the surface. Now, Jacob, for his part, responds, "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive." The family is complete. The reunification is complete. That's all Jacob needs to see. But don't worry, Jacob. You've got a bit of life left in you yet. So, Joseph arranges for his father and brothers to meet the Pharaoh, and he instructs them rather curiously to be careful to identify themselves as hereditary keepers of livestock. And that will affirm Pharaoh's decision to settle them in Goshen rather than in the area of the royal court, because we are told, without explanation, "For all shepherds are detestable to the Egyptians." Well, that's rather hard on all shepherds, and it's a curious line. After all, we know that Pharaoh had herds of his own. Remember the dream about the skinny cows eating the fat cows? Those were Pharaoh's cows. Now, it's possible there's a translation issue causing the problem, and it is this. A group known as the Hyksos from the region of Syria, so somewhat to the north and east of Israel proper, had been a worrisome military threat to the Egyptians, managing to even briefly wrest control of the lower parts of the kingdom of Egypt. Not too distant a time from our story here. In fact, perhaps even contemporary with our story here. Now, they may have been named Hyksos by the Egyptians, which is close to the Egyptian word for shepherd, rather than having that name themselves. Perhaps these Hyksos people were militarily organized bands of shepherding folk who, perhaps due to famine, entered Egypt aggressively and managed to gain control of that southern portion. Now, despite Joseph's family being unrelated to these Syrian Hyksos, they ran the risk of being identified with them, and therefore as a possible military threat. These days, we know all about what it is for a person of a particular nationality finding themselves suddenly lumped in with others from a similar nationality and therefore regarded with suspicion. Well, with all of that, you've got the Israelites coming down and their shepherds as well, so they're going to be viewed by the population with a little bit of concern and as a possible threat. Therefore, Goshen, up and on that side of the Nile, is a safer place for them to settle. And indeed, they would be regarded as a threat, a serious threat much later. But that's in Exodus. Did I mention Exodus before? You can see how these last chapters of Genesis are very much leading up to, they're an introduction to the book of Exodus and the situations which arise there. Kind of like when you're watching a mini-series on TV, and the end of the season, the final episode is coming up, and oh, what's going to happen next? Well, what is going to happen next? We're not quite finished with Genesis yet, and so we'll get some more clues and hints. So, we're all set up. The family has arrived, the reunion is complete, bygones are bygones, and now it's time to meet the Pharaoh, which I'm really looking forward to, since the meeting between Pharaoh and Jacob has one of my favorite verses in the whole Bible. But we'll have to wait for next time and for Genesis chapter 47 as we continue to read the Bible together. We'll see you then.